Hi, and welcome to Finextra at Cybos TV. And today I'm speaking with Brett King of Bank 2.0 fame and of Movenbank. So, hello, how are you?
Good, I'm very good, thanks.
You chose Cybos to launch and talk about Movenbank, which is a paperless, branchless, mobile-centric bank. And you're known as being a guy that talks a lot about retail bank issues.
Sure.
But banking is one of probably the most regulated industry in the world. Why did you go into this business? Why did you start this?
I think what came out of the research from Bank 2.0, and as the book came out and I started speaking at a higher level with the excos and the heads of retail about this shift from Bank 1.0 to Bank 2.0, what became evident is that this friction that currently is coming into play where customers are behaving differently and trying to get banks to behave differently is really, really hard. So, if you want to get a bank to behave differently, you really have to build the bank differently. So that's where Movenbank really started.
Is that where you sort of like put your money where your mouth is, you thought?
Well, I think there's part of that. A lot of people said, well, how would you build a bank? And in the end, I sort of thought, well, it's going to be really hard to take these traditional organizations that have so much inertia behind them in respect to how they do things and the policies and procedures and all of those things, that we may have to just start again. And then out of that, I thought, well, I can do this because I know how to do this. So it was just a matter of putting together the team that could execute it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Ron Shelvin of the Ate Group wrote a blog saying, who in the world would go into banking? It's so heavily regulated.
Right.
You have to be a fool. So,
Sure.
I mean, who's handling the regulations for this?
Well, I think if you look at the regulatory environment, there is, I don't know whether actually the regulations are that erroneous, because if you look at something like KYC, we talk about KYC being so problematic and all of the stuff we have to do, but when you actually get down to it and you look at the CIP for the Patriot Act, the Customer Identification Program, the details we require of a customer and what we need to do are actually very, very simple. So this perception that we're heavily regulated, we are, but in terms of the interface between the bank and the customer, there's no need for that regulation or that complexity to be part of the customer experience, and that's the issue. Yeah. We can hide the regulatory complex stuff and the process complexity. We can hide that from the customer.
Even if it's hidden, you still have to handle it, though. So how is that being handled?
Well, if you take KYC and risk mitigation, let's take risk as an example. Banks say that we have to go through all this checking and you have to give us all of this information so that we can properly assess the risk of the customer to the institution. But if we just collected that information gradually over time and watch how customers behave, we'd actually get a far better profile in respect to the risk of the customer than just doing it all at once, at one event or one time with the customer. So just taking a different view of how you handle the regulation and the complexity is I guess, key to what Movenbank is founded on.
So, but I mean, in sort of a practical sense, who physically is going to handle that?
So the way we're doing it currently is we started off looking at getting our own bank charter, but in the United States, getting a bank charter at the moment is really, really tough and it's very time consuming. And so because it's a time to market issue for us, we're working with a number of bank partners at the back end who'll provide the facilitation and the processing and so forth. So they're handling the bulk of the data storage from a account or deposit perspective and then the transaction processing perspective, but we own the complete front end. Okay. So we're doing all the KYC, but we pass the complexity of the core banking system back to the banking partner. Yeah. But we still have to be compliant with all the regs and the rules at the front end, just that we're handling that interface with the customer very, very differently from a traditional bank.
Yeah, I want to get into the front end a little bit later, but I just want to read this because this was, I thought, a kind of an interesting term where it said, Movenbank promises to import modern internet trends in gamification to reimagine the customer experience. Now, what does that mean in real, plain, simple language?
So one of the problems we have today with the way traditional banking is evolving is that banking is no longer a place you go. If you look at the internet, mobile payments now, it's all about stretching that connection between the institution and the customer away from physical artifacts. So banking is now something you do, not a place you go. So when you understand that, how do you engage a customer differently? The traditional bank will say, we send out a message and we tell you we're a fantastic bank and you should take our credit card or take our personal loan or mortgage or small business loan because we're great, right? And then we sit and wait for the customer to come to us, and the customer comes and we say, all right, now before we'll let you be our customer, we'll make you jump through all these hoops because that's what the policy says or that's what the regs say. So we thought that process was completely broken. So when we talk about gamification, really it's more about the way we engage customers on a daily basis. And in terms of reducing risk to the institution, the main thing that we wanted to really focus on was changing your behaviour, so helping you spend, save and live in a smarter way. And so Movenbank, and particularly our cred ecosystem, is about a messaging architecture that helps customers understand how they can be financially healthy and help them to behave in a positive way.
So we hear these words like gamification, but what does that really mean if, I decide to become a Movenbank customer and I go to the site? What will I see? What will it do?
Yeah, well, we're starting the alpha site launch, which is for 1st of October. We're starting with helping you understand your financial personality. So in respect to the gamification elements of this, we're building a system that rewards customers for good behavior. So that might be a badge, right? Like a Foursquare badge or something like that. But it also might be access to a product or a service based upon the credibility that you have as a customer. So cred is really about assessing the customer in a different lens. No longer just the credit score, but looking at other things like the influence they have socially, the economic profit that the customer brings, and their day-to-day behavior. So where the gamification element comes in is when you behave well, we reward you with the game, in the game, so that that's visible to you, but then you can choose to make that visible to others. So then it comes into a viral element. For example, if you invite your friends through social networks to Movenbank, then we understand that that has a value to us from a marketing perspective, so we'll reward you with increased profile with cred.
Interesting, yeah. So I know that you're big on, the customer interface, and the customer really, it shouldn't matter to them what happens in the back end, but is Movenbank sort of around that bank simple model where they're doing the customer interface and then they partner with banks to handle all the back end? How is that business model set up?
So I guess, we're big fans of Bank Simple. I'm friends with Josh and Shamir, and so, I'm a fan of what they're doing. I think their video they released this week on what they're doing is fantastic. So this is all part of this movement to really simplify and reduce friction at the front end. But in terms of where we're going, it's not only a user interface change, but it's a contextuality change. So this is why mobile is the primary contact point for Movenbank customers. So not only will we have an improved UI, but the user interface day to day will be the mobile wallet as you pay with a contactless card built into the phone. And the reason that changes your relationship with the bank is every time you transact, every time you interact, there's an opportunity for us to communicate to you. So rather than having just a simple UI and improving the flow, which we definitely will do, we also want to change the context of banking to something that's more based on location and what you're doing and how the bank can act as a utility rather than waiting for you to come to us when you need a product or service.
Okay. So what's in the back end? Because we're a big bank infrastructure audience.
Sure.
So who's handling the actual banking behind the customer?
So we have core systems partners, we have processing partners that will be enabling that. I'm not at a point to announce who they are.
But are they going to be
but
banks?
Yeah, they'll be definitely banks, and you'll know these organisations. So they will handle the heavy lifting for the core system stuff, but we're going to be doing a lot of integration of various capabilities. So whether it's a processor or whether it's something like P2P lending or PayPal, we're pretty agnostic about this type of utility that we want to bring into Movenbank so that we can make your experience as a consumer as best as possible. So it's not going to be one bank with a new front end on. It's going to be a range of capabilities.
Partner banks and payments.
Again, I want to stress it's the utility of banking that we're looking for through Movenbank.
See, banks still have a purpose.
Sorry?
Banks still have a purpose.
Well, they do, but it's not that we're trying to reinvent banking across the entire gamut, but it's that the front end is broken, the customer experience is broken. So we're trying, what will probably result of all these innovations we're seeing, the Google Wallet, Bank Simple, Movenbank, Fedor, PayPal. This is detaching a lot of the retail front end, the customer experience, from the back end. The fear is that if banks don't start to make that transition themselves, they'll end up being the back end, the wires, the networks, but they'll lose that relevance and connection with the customer.
I wanted to finish off with a few sort of like practical questions. So, who built all this? Who's your tech partner to build all the customer front end?
So we've got a great technical team internally. We've got on the heavy lifting side, we've got guys who've come out of the Fed system, they've worked on treasury systems and large transaction-based systems. So operationally, really robust data analytics and core systems. We've got a mathematics and persuasion and behavior team sort of sitting behind the credit ecosystem, the gamification engagement model system. And then we've got a very, very strong customer experience team. So experts in infographics, experts in creative design, user interface, mobile wallet integration. We're going to be announcing very shortly the head of mobile, who's come out of a very strong player in the mobile space. So we've got a team that's really second to none, but our focus is really on rebooting that front end in terms of the way the bank works for you every day.
So you're obviously the face of Movenbank.
Sure.
So who are your investors?
So we have a private investor who's put up, we're fully funded at the moment. We have a private investor out of Asia who's funded us. And he basically heard about what we're doing and approached us and said, I hear you're talking to VCs and the people about funding at the moment. I really believe in this, and how much do you need? It was so it made our life a lot easier.
Is he public? Is he?
It's we can't announce it yet who it is, just because we want to leave that for a little bit later.
So we're waiting for your bank partners, and we're waiting for your investor.
The bank partners will probably happen very soon. In terms of the investment, I think what we'd rather do is, rather than talk about how much money we've raised, which in itself will be a big announcement when it comes, we want to really talk about what we're doing and how we're going to change banking. So we don't want the funding to become the focus of the discussion.
That's great, Brett. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.